red flags go up for people and they maybe start to tense up. But again, we're talking about something that's all pretty fairly well documented in the Anglo-American establishment. And then doesn't this relate to September 11th in yet another way?
Well, sure, because he says on page 172, he's like, he's talking about Lord Milner and how they create this thing called the Balfour Declaration, which was actually a letter, a receipt for a trading of the land. Now, the British promised the land to three different groups, and then they came to be pressed to make a decision, and they decided to create a future Zionist state on September 11th, 1922. You can check the internet. That's the actual mandate to create Palestine into a future Zionist state, which happened, like 20 years later. And that was the fallout from the Balfour Declaration, which was a promise by men who did not own that land to give that land to other men who did not own that land for purposes of gaining power over a group of people, the Muslims, that they couldn't easily control through TV or mechanized war.
So going back to what may seem in a way like ancient history, but as we're talking about Cecil Rhodes and Carroll Quigley and the Milner Group and these sort of roundtables, this is essentially the foundation of what has been built in America over the last couple of hundred years. And it's where all, I think, the sinister forces, if you will, where they sort of originate and where they were planted here in this country.
Well, and I think it's another thing. It's like the blind spot that we have is that there was this guy, Cecil Rhodes, who now has a country named after him, Rhodesia, who was in charge of creating apartheid. He was basically in charge of creating institutionalized racism in South Africa. He made all his money on diamonds and gold, and all of his assets through his will were turned over to the Rhodes Scholar Trust and this secret society, which is run by the people who funded Cecil Rhodes, which is the Rothschild banking family. And you can go to any Barnes & Noble and go and ask on for the books on the Rothschild family. It's a 2-volume set, and it's not conspiracy like I thought it was. I went to the bookstore and I got the books, and I was like, wow, this is history. It's it's full of conspiracy because that's how they gain power. It's full of counter conspiracy because that's how they retain power. But it's absolutely historical, and I think that they've been growing us dumb. And anyone who believes that there's no conspiracy in the world definitely has not read any good history books.
And even the very word conspiracy has been twisted into being a sort of, it's a slur. And it's something that you say that word, and that means you're crazy cuckoo and you're talking about chupacabras and aliens and all that, right?
Well, I think that really indicates first, it's a shortcut to thinking. And B, it's a sign that the person you're talking to has been highly conditioned such that the utterance of one word can make them emotionally react about a situation they have not studied, that they have not applied any critical thinking to, and they haven't thought about objectively, which is why they're emotionally responding instead of intellectually debating. The point of debate is to bring these two opposite sides together and sharpen each other, not break each other, because you want to refine your points. And you can't argue with idiots or clowns or kooks. So, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone has a right. If they want to be ignorant, leave them alone. I'm only trying to get the information to the people who are seeking the answers because there are families out there who've been lied to. Those families need to know that the evidence exists to point them in the right direction. They need to know that we've taken that evidence to the lawyers like Ron Motley, who claim to represent you, a billionaire attorney who claims to represent 4,000 families, and they pocket the evidence and say, we don't need to follow this because it leads from the Arab people they're following back to Wall Street bankers. And that doesn't fit their case. So it gets put in a drawer, and Ron Motley's firm never tells you guys anything about what goes on or what was turned over to them. So when I went out and looked for people in the world who I could trust with the information I had, I found out the hard way and found out, like falling off a cliff, that you can't, there's no leadership. There's no one minding the store. Everybody is looting this whole place. There's no longer an authority that doesn't have an authority above that that's going to shut down any investigation that any leader says that they're going to do. So the only answer is re-elect no one. No one who has been elected, as far as I'm concerned or I can see, has done the job properly, because some people might claim that there's a politician out there and his name's so-and-so and he's doing a great job and he's going to be leader of America. I got news for you. He's been saying that shit for 20 years. Hasn't happened yet. You are the future. It's you that you should be concerned about. Educate yourself and figure out what is going on and be the change that you see needs to take place in the world.
That's exactly it. And that's paraphrasing Gandhi, is it not? Be the change you want to see in the world.
When I also advise people not to idolize people like Gandhi. He's just a regular dude like you or me. He made mistakes. He's a human being. And while he denied his wife, I think it was quinine, and she died, he actually took the drug to save his life. So, that all being said, he did a lot of great things. There's a lot of great examples. I just don't like anyone who's an equal human being with me, like following somebody else around without looking or giving all this gratitude to false heroes. Because I went out and I had all my false heroes broken because I realized these people are taking the money and they're very happy to do it. So you got to be your own leader. You got to stand up for yourself. You got to make yourself into the person you see needs to be out there.
I think that's
what we try to do here.
I think that's absolutely right. If I can pull back again a moment, and I'm somewhat reluctantly making the analogy of a pyramid, that if we have these Rothschilds and all the other sort of names and handfuls of families that, again, it wasn't in a conspiracy book, it was in that dusty biography corner of the bookstore, they kind of set this foundation for us that we've seen. And again, I can only speak best in a way about, American history. I'm a West Virginia boy, small upbringing and all of that, but it's those guys that have seemed to sort of set up the structure that has what you just referred to. It's they start the wars, they make the money, they play both ends against the middle. They do these things that cast shadows on the wall and to generally keep us on that playing field. And
it's
it
the
keeps
allegory
us...
of the cave. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. It's the allegory of the cave. Read it. It's still going on. 2,000 years later, people don't understand. They're watching the shadows on the wall. And we are talking about more real things after which the models you think are real are created. I mean, that's how it rolls. I'm looking at a book here called The History of the Supreme Court of the United States, published in 1918 by Gustavus Myers. In here, he talks about Supreme Court Justice Morrison R. Waite and his close ties to the corporations and all these railroad companies. He was buddies with the Harrimans and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. And, he's doing all this great work for them. And he is the Supreme Court Justice who, in 2 sentences and without any debate, gave corporations the same rights as human beings. Only corporations have no body to prosecute and no soul to save. So their ideals, their goals, their needs are 180 degrees, divergent from what we need as human beings. So corporations' interests are in conflict directly with human interests because of something that some skull and bones Chief Justice of the Supreme Court said in 1886 in 2 sentences that plagues our world today, because without corporations having the same actions and abilities as people legally, we wouldn't have all this toxicity throughout our environment, because corporations also externalize their true cost of producing products to you, either by poisoning your environment or poisoning you through their products directly. And that's why advertising doesn't work in corporate media, because it's more profitable to censor and suppress information that would embarrass a Monsanto or a Bayer or any of these other pharmaceutical companies or military industrial companies that are preying on us daily. Well, there might be people in your audience who say, well, I don't believe in conspiracies. I still don't believe you. I've read these books. I don't believe you. Well, here's Fire in the Minds of Men, Origins of the Revolutionary Faith by James H. Billington, who was not only a Librarian of Congress, but he's also a Rhodes Scholar. And let's see what he talks about in here. Oh, he's talking about the Masons and different fraternities and secret societies and, the occult origins of organization. So he's basically saying all the organizations, including, Bavarian Illuminism and Freemasonry and the other things he's talking about in this great big thick book, all exist, and, only people who don't know about it are the victims, because victims don't read books. And that's kind of how you determine if you're a victim or not. Are you reading their books and understanding and bypassing their shell game, or are you playing into it every day, right? Because, we're allowed to maintain these beliefs about, what we think America is because of the media companies. But look, in March 1915, this is a statement by U.S. Congressman Oscar Callaway in 1917. And he states, in March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and